So friends, let's begin the Realty Plus e-conclave with the first session of the day on the topic Some Hits, Some Misses, Budget Impact on Real Estate. And these are our eminent panel member. Let me introduce our speakers of the session. The session will be chaired by Shobhit Agarwal, MD and CEO, Anarock Capital. Shobhit is a visionary entrepreneur with professional excellence and experience of over 20 years in real estate investments. At Anarock Capital, Shobhit steers the strategic direction through the various investment verticals. His in-depth knowledge about the sector and deep-rooted relationship with developers and capital providers have resulted in multi-billion-dollar deals. Introducing our speakers in an alphabetical order, let me welcome Mr. Abhishek Sharma, partner, co-head real estate, Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas. Abhishek has over 18 years of experience and specializes in commercial, retail, industrial, and residential real estate transactions across India. He advises various domestic and international clients such as corporate houses, developers, real estate funds, high net worth individuals on various aspects of real estate, including in relation to factory land, special townships, information technology parks, special economic zones, malls, agricultural lands, residential and commercial buildings, etc. Our next eminent panel member is Mr. Ambar Maheshwari, CEO, Indiabulls Asset Management. Mr. Ambar Maheshwari looks after the private equity business with focus on real estate. A chartered accountant, Ambar brings with him substantial deal-making and structuring experience in the real estate sector. With an overall experience of over 20 years in India and Australia, Ambar has been focusing on the real estate sector for more than 10 years now. Our next panel member, let me introduce Mr. Amit Bhagat, CEO and MD Ask Property Investment Advisors Private Limited. Amit Bhagat joined Ask in 2008 and co-founded the real estate fund practice of the group. He manages and advises over 50 billion rupees of real estate investments. He was a national credit head for the mortgage division of ICICI Bank and also headed ICICI Property Services. He's a chartered accountant and has over 27 years of experience in mortgage finance and financial services. Our next panel member is Mr. Ashwinder R. Singh, CEO, Residential Bhartiya Urban and a best-selling author. Ashwinder is a real estate finance developer, developer funding and banking professional. He has helped several organizations achieve market commanding positions, including JLL Residential, Anarock Properties, where he served as CEO for both India and UAE, and Bajaj Housing Finance Limited, where he was the group business head for the country, heading multiple mortgage businesses ranging from construction finance, inventory funding, and home loans. In his early years, he served many senior executive roles in banking with Citibank, ICICI Bank, and Deutsche Bank. Our next and final member, I introduce Mr. Neeraj Bansal, partner and CEO, India Global, KPMG in India. Neeraj Bansal is a senior partner with over 23 years of professional experience. He holds a strong relationship with member firms across ASEAN, HK, and Taiwan, with a focus on growing inbound and outbound business operations, and has played the role of market maker through collaboration with ASEAN and HK member firms. He has extensive experience serving global clients in the IT BPM and service industry, delivering broad range of solutions addressing various risks and scalability requirements. So this is our eminent panel. And now let me hand it over to our moderator of the session, Mr. Shobhit Agarwal.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank, first of all, Realty Conclave for organizing this, and all our fellow members on the dais for taking off time on Saturday afternoon to be with us. Looks like, Ambar, you are in a nice place. I hope it's not just a picture in the background.
It's a picture in the background, I'm afraid.
I thought so. I thought there's an illusion saying you're sitting in the Himalayas, but nonetheless, thank you everybody for joining this. Our session today is about the impact on the impact of budget on real estate. We couldn't have chosen a better panel than this. We've got experts on residential real estate, commercial, Ashwinder, who's done mortgages. We've got people from finance and legal background. So it's a very, very rounded panel. We'll try and speak for about 40 minutes and try and extract the best out of you guys for our audience today. So let me just start. I think it's a panel is slightly late for budget impact, but nonetheless, let me just get to hits and misses. What have been the top 3 hits and misses? Let's try and reason that out for Union Budget 2022-23. And I'd like to start with Amit. You're heavily invested in residential through and through. This is both on debt and equity. You see these projects all the way. What were some of your wish list? And some of those got addressed, some haven't. So can you start with top 3 hits and top 3 misses?
Thank you, Shobhit, for inviting us to this panel. But I'll start with the wish list. But there's a very good saying by George Bernard Shaw: "Wishes were horses, beggars would ride." So with that,
a perfect start for the day. So yeah, let's get to the horses first.
So I think we all wanted more tax benefit for the end users. We wanted that negative arbitrage, which was a second home benefit tax, to come back. We wanted input tax credit because the cost of materials have gone up. But having said that, I think if you look at the budget has focused not on any short term, because whenever short term benefits are given by the budget, it tends to become a norm. And then withdrawal of that becomes challenge. So government has very clearly focused on that for the first time home buyer, there are enough tax benefits for the affordable segment or lower mid segment. And they don't want to cater to the luxury and the upper mid segment. They have focused completely on infrastructure, which creates a sustainable housing real estate demand. Because if you look at when our new cities were created, so I only remember one city, which is Noida and Greater Noida, and Yamuna Expressway will take another 10 years and it is in construction for the last 10 years. Hyderabad is one which has shown exemplary infrastructure for others to follow. And similarly, Navi Mumbai has started with the airport announcement and various infrastructure efforts. So I guess if government focuses only on infrastructure, they will create sustainable real estate demand for all times to come with job creation. So the government has focused on giving infrastructure status to data centers, energy storage. SEZ Act is will be rewritten, which is the need of the hour. But they have not gone on any quick fixes. As an industry, we all expected that there will be some quick fixes.
Thank you. You brought up quite interesting subjects on sustainable development and led through infra, and then tax benefit for end users, tax credit inputs. I'm going to move to Ashwinder. Ashwinder, when you can also add to what Amit just said. But one quick question: Union budget this time allocated 48,000 crores for PMAY. With a very large focus, and it's been a consistent focus for the government to talk about affordable housing at the real bottom of the pyramid. But from a developer perspective, the only thing that seems to be growing is mid-market, and I'll quantify that. That's between 80 lakhs to 1.5 crores. So over 60% of all new supply is actually in that price range. So what do you feel about this, right? Is this sufficient? Is this going to be taken care of? And how does the government help in refocusing the developer to do the real PMAY sort of stuff? They have really got big allocations for it. So you have been part of a developer outfit. So the question is to you.
Shobhit, it's a very thoughtful question. Yes, what has happened in the last couple of years is that the budget range has been 80 lakhs to 1.5 crore because somewhere, that extra room is costing that extra amount. And but this does not affect the large population that finds this budget range out of question and consideration. 96% is low income group, which will account for affordable housing. The target audience of affordable segment, according to me, are many employed in the MSME sector, which is the largest in India, which has got the most severely impacted during the COVID, and they are taking time to kind of come out of it, because MSME was where the salaries got stopped. It was not the large global firms, tech firms, or larger companies in the top 7-8 cities that were getting impacted, but the MSMEs got impacted, their cash flows got impacted, salaries were stopped. So this segment got a hit. So somewhere I feel that when we say the demand is there for 80 to 150 is because that segment did not get impacted in COVID. The segment that actually got impacted in COVID was that employee of an MSME, which is a very large segment. So demand of affordable homes has not disappeared. I think, buyers seem to have gone into a wait mode for time being. Affordable housing demand is going to come back, and this is where the maximum demand is, and that is where India lies. The country has a massive housing shortage. There is a requirement of 20 million in urban and 10 million in the rural sector by 2025. I guess now with the pandemic becoming an endemic, we will see the affordable demand coming up. There is a 48,000 crore allocation, as you rightly said, which is there. Government wants this segment to start doing some stuff. Developers also have to do some stuff. Yes, they are moving out from the CBD. There is a blur between cities like Pune and Bombay. If not, it is soon going to be. So this is where we will see affordable segment coming in, and I feel the demand is going to be back sooner than later.
Thank you, Ashwinder. You are saying that the demand is intact, but because it got deferred, the developers also refocused on the mid-market.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to link the two, Ashwinder, you talking about demand and Amit talking about sustainable development. And he also touched very briefly on infra, right? In my view, if there's inadequate infrastructure, and I think he alluded to it saying Hyderabad is ahead of the curve, Ahmedabad is ahead of the curve, and many other cities want to just catch up, Noida and Greater Noida. So I think the government this time focused very heavily on infrastructure growth. They spoke about Gati Shakti program, the expansion of road, railways, ports, multimodal, all of you. So Neeraj, what's your view on how this is going to impact general real estate, or is it only going to impact the warehousing and the logistics sectors, which seems to be the flavor of the day within the subsector of real estate, right? Saying it seems to be growing. So what is the direct impact of infrastructure and infrastructure spend by the government?
No, thanks, Shobhit, for that. And rightly, Amit pointed out that the infrastructure spend will bring about sustainable demand, and also create much larger demand as well. So the PM Gati Shakti plan, as you also said, is a very holistic view that has been taken towards both kind of creating an economic growth and also sustainable development around it, because the focus is on the 7 engines as it was set out as well, in terms of roads, railways, ports, mass transport, waterways, and logistics infrastructure as well. So when the focus is on the roads and railways, it will also help us to improve the multimodal connectivity as well. And the announcement was also on the multimodal logistics parks over there. So while it has certainly a strong impact on the logistics and infrastructure industry, but there would be benefits in terms of the manufacturing industry. And then related to that, the commercial real estate demand certainly gets influenced by increase in economic activity and the manufacturing activity over there. And all of us know that our logistics cost has been a very high logistics cost compared to the global averages around it. So while the sector is contributing almost 14.4%, but to the GDP, but in terms of the cost that is there, it's about 14% compared to a global average of 8% over there. And there've been several studies which has happened, and one of the economic survey it also pointed out in 2-3 years back, in terms of saying that of a 10% decrease in the logistics cost would lead to a export growth of about 5 to 8% over there. So the Gati Shakti plan in this context has a significant potential to positively impact the logistics, manufacturing, and also the commercial real estate over there, because the focus is to kind of expand it by 25,000 kilometers over there, which will connect the manufacturing hubs to the remotest parts of the country there. So we'll see a lot more connectivity, a lot more flow of goods around it at a much faster speed, lower cost over there. And as you kind of connect this, with the tier 2 and tier 3 cities, you will see a lot more demand on the warehousing and logistics aspect of it as well. Because I think from a capital perspective, there is no dearth of capital. There's almost more than $5 billion which can be invested in the the warehousing and industrial space. And the grade A warehousing, we'll see more coming up as well. Once the connectivity is established, under this program over there. And the Gati Shakti plan is a very comprehensive plan which has been thought out as well. So while I spoke about roads, given the time that we'll have, but certainly there is a focus on railways, ports, and the multi-modal logistics parks as well there. So all in all, this is a fundamental change will be brought about to the way the logistics sector is perceived around it. Once the the execution is also done around it there. So the hope is that the execution speed matches the investment which has been earmarked for this as well.
Thank you, Neeraj. Very interesting. I didn't know that statistics saying if 10% cost is reduced, exports will go up disproportionately. I just wanted to finish the connection between infra and real estate, and I'll bring in my friend here, Ambar. Ambar, my general view is that moment you build out good infra, it actually inversely impacts real estate prices, right? So wherever there is surplus infra, and I'm going to use this example saying Hyderabad, Ahmedabad, Greater Noida and Noida, where they have laid out road infra and all other things, actually the real estate cost is quite in control. And the opposite narration to that is Mumbai, where you find that this is clearly an infra constraint, and therefore you have disproportionately high costs. So I want to check with you whether you agree, and then whatever Neeraj has laid out saying government is going to put in so much infra, what is it going to do to real estate, both resi, office, and maybe you can talk about warehousing as well.
Yeah, no, thanks, Shobhit. Absolutely agree. The prices are inversely impacted because of very good infrastructure if it comes about in a particular city. We've seen enough and more examples. You laid out a few examples of those as well. And that might not be a bad thing, given the kind of demand and where the demand is for housing. I've always maintained real estate, you need to look at from two perspectives. It's not just an investment asset class, it's a consumption asset class as well. And therefore, from a consumption standpoint, if the prices remain in check, it's a great thing for real estate, right? Also, and this is again, age-old wisdom, real estate grows on the back of the growth in the economy of various other sectors. And if infrastructure is laid out, if there is capital expenditure that the government is doing, which will lead to crowding in of private investment cycle as well, job creation, employment creation, and all of those things will lead to demand for residential, for commercial, logistics, where all kinds of sectors, right? For the last 20 odd years, we've seen, the largest demand coming from IT sector, whether it is employment that is created in the IT sector. And because of that, the residential demand that comes through, obviously commercial is very, very directly proportional to how an industry grows. But residential demand also comes along, the number of people that IT sector employs, if the industry grows, the promotions happen quicker, the disposable incomes of employees in the IT sector goes up. And therefore, these are the guys who are buying all of these houses, right? We need new industries to come up in India, which can employ a sizable number of people, if not more than the IT sector currently does. And I think, infrastructure is one thing which certainly will help in, like I said, crowding in the private sector investment cycle, which will create employment opportunities. But what this budget has also done outside of infrastructure is lay down the building blocks for a lot of new age sectors. So whether it is artificial intelligence, whether it is renewables, whether it is genomics, semiconductors, drones, all of those are sectors which will create employment opportunities and will attract private investment. And that will lead to a huge amount of residential demand. Again, like I said, residential demand and office demand grows on the back of other sectors. If banking is doing well, if IT is doing well, commercial office and residential real estate will do well as well. So yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. So you're clearly saying that it's real estate is a byproduct of economy. If economy does well, both on the office side as well as manufacturing, it will fuel growth or holistic growth. I'm going to move to Abhishek. Abhishek has been sitting quietly. I think Amit brought up this point, and I'm just going to narrate it, saying one thing that's very certain in going forward from here is that all costs are going up, especially the input cost on material, whether it's cement, steel, labor, health, everything has to be looked after. And of course, there's also an incremental layer of compliance with RERA, GST, etc. So there's direct material input cost. There is also a cost attached to compliance, and then therefore GST, right? I don't know for what reason, but it's probably perhaps the only sector where GST imposed cost is disallowed. A, is it healthy? And B, do you think the government will reconsider bringing the GST as an input cost and making it a pass through? Because I thought that is the essence of that tax. GST is supposed to monitor till the end. Suddenly you've broken the chain in real estate, which is one of the largest sort of pillars of economy. And I don't understand why it was done. And then I want to ask you, given your sort of practice, do you think this is going to be allowed again?
Sure. Thank you, Shobhit, for the question. Very important question for the industry. The number of deals where what we are doing for the last 2 years, since 2019, GST has been an issue because of disallowance of ITC. Now, if you look at various issues which the government was considering in 2019 before disallowing, because it was allowed, ITC was allowed prior to April 2019. Now, what we find is very interestingly, there were certain malpractices where the developers were not passing on the benefit of the ITC to the end user. That was the biggest issue. You saw many anti-profiteering matters going in various forums. I think what government has, the reason why ITC was disallowed, because they did not have sufficient trust in the industry that the end user will get benefit of the ITC. Of course, things have changed. Things have changed across the nation because of RERA, because of IBC. There is a lot of transparency. People are getting PE funds in large developers. So therefore, there are a lot of checks and balances. I think this is a time where the government should consider bringing in ITC. But honestly, my view is it will be challenging. This is a long-standing ask of the industry. They reduced the rate, but they did not get in ITC. They reduced the rate from 12 to 5%, from 8% to 1%. I think it will be slightly difficult for the government at this moment. Of course, the agenda is not placed and available in the in public domain of the GST Council. But I think it will be challenging. If it is given, I think it will be a blessing for the industry, especially in these times where cost is very high. And I think where the government can actually help is where they can actually reduce the GST on raw materials like cement, where it is 28%, steel, it is 18%. I think even if that relief is given, it will be a big relief to the industry. So I think GST is a pain point. And of course, there are GST on FSI trading, TDR trading. I think government can look at reducing those rates or waiving out for some time. So I think GST relief is required at this moment to support the industry.
I can almost see Ashwinder is itching to say something. You want to add something, Ashwinder, and please feel free to raise your hand if you want to add. But I can almost see him speaking out.
So what Abhishek is saying, with the elections going on and the oil prices where they are and where they are going to be after the elections are going to be over, we see a 8 to 10 rupee increase coming in the oil prices. I don't think we are in any. As Abhishek himself is saying, it is going to be challenging. And Shobhit, I myself could not understand why this input credit was taken away. But all of these things are taking us back to where we always were as an industry, as a fraternity, that the industry has actually never got well represented, or maybe the government looks at the industry in a very, very, very different and a myopic way. And that is where all of us actually end up thinking, why is what is happening around? Even if you look at the, loss on home loan, which, Amit started with, for the tax rebates that you want to give to the home buyer, why would you not give a tax rebate to the home buyer which was already there? So you're right. You just can't understand why all of this is happening.
So you're saying there is general trust deficiency.
Yes,
And,
there is something which I think there is a lobby which feels that, this industry kind of makes money in multiple ways, and even if you don't give them this option, they will see. Obviously, this is the most resilient industry. If you look around, despite developers going through all the hell, and you have dealt with so many large developers, Ambar is there, Neeraj, Amit, everyone. This is the most resilient sector. Barring a few names, nobody has been bogged down, and they're all up and about trying to figure out how to do business. So, sometimes your strength becomes a weakness at a larger level.
yeah,
I just
I'm
want
going
to
bring
show it
Ambar. Yeah.
just
No,
one.
I was going to bring you in, so please go ahead.
So I thought, both of you said, I don't know why the input credit was taken away. As far as I recall, and I could be wrong, it's just something that I'm remembering now. I think we as an industry went to the government and said, give us a concessional rate of GST, and we will forego the ITC.
No, you're absolutely right. You're
Deliberate
absolutely
thing,
right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I didn't mean that I was not aware, but it did break the chain at that point, and it was the industry ask. So
Yeah.
our real estate represented saying we want to simplify. Abhishek also sort of alluded saying it kind of took away a little bit of compliance from both sides. But over to Abhishek, he wants to add something.
Interestingly, Ambar, you have a very valid point, and now the ask of the industry is you increase the rate of GST to 12% from 5%,
and give us
ITC. So I think
because the overall cost on tax, because of tax, if you look at the way that cost sheets are, and if you just look at it, they have figured out that the cost has just increased because of the revision of the way we are looking at everything. So tax has now become a cost. Earlier it wasn't, it was neutral.
So I think it's a representation issue. It's not a
Maybe I fortunately there are no developers on this call, so I can say it's not about representation; it's about understanding, right?
So I think representations have gone. Representations have gone.
You shot yourself in your foot, so that's fine.
Yes,
now we to reverse
absolutely.
it. But Neeraj brought about another point, which I do want you and Amit to talk about, Ambar and Amit, saying that there is a role of private equity beyond just providing money. And Abhishek clearly mentioned saying checks and balances. He didn't elaborate on it. How you finding is that really tough, and people who've been through a private equity phase, either through you or Amit or anybody, is there a change in the developer and the way he operates after you guys have invested? It's very critical, according to me, saying, is it permanent or is it only that one project he does an oversight, but everything else is still the same, right? So is there a behavior change in the developer?
So I don't know what Amit's view on this is, but I think it's a very project specific thing, Shobhit. If you're monitored, you're doing what you're required to do. If you're not monitored, you're not. The developers even today, of course, barring the top 10, top 15.
Yeah, wherever corporate governance is in place, that's not a problem. It's really where you're trying to bring it up, right? So you're saying it's not a permanent change. It's not a permanent change.
I don't think it's a permanent change. Till the time the industry is going to remain unorganized, till the time, you really don't need a qualification or a certification to become a real estate developer. The RERA that has come about regulates real estate projects, but it does not, regulate anything else. A variety of other things have to be regulated by RERA only. Then will these things change? I think also it's more a timing issue in my mind, Shobhit. These are things which typically take some time to bring the behavioral change that we talk about. Indian corporate sector took 3-4 decades for this change to come about. It was only when the new age Infosys and Wipros and TCSs of the world came about on the scene that corporate governance became the buzzword. Prior to late 90s, it was all free for all.
Free for all.
Well,
In the
NSC is
corporate
trying,
sector.
and NSC is still trying to defy the corporate governance of that. So let us
Okay.
not be so sure about others and kind of be harsh to ourselves.
Absolutely. But you are saying that change is slow, but it's inevitable. Amit, you've invested in over 50 projects, perhaps even many more, and successfully exited. You've done repeat business with developers. What's your view in terms of upping the corporate governance and therefore overall improvement? So it's not just you providing money to the developer, right? You're also bringing checks and balances, as I repeated saying it. Is that correct?
I think you're right, Shobhit, because if you look at listed developers or foreign institutional investors invest with them without any control, and they expect performance with governance. So I guess we can't paint the entire industry with the same brush. We have certain corporate developers also which are unlisted as partners. Governance is a question of the value system and the intent and the capability. But having said that, you will find partners when the going is good, governance is good. When the going is not good, the governance is not good.
Okay, two sides of the coin.
You have to protect your own money. You have to find ways to do it. But yes, it will change. And I think Ambar has rightly pointed out, it is going to take because undercapitalized sector, complete nexus, still cash handling issues. There are too many issues. And if you really want to bring governance, the only solution is bring a world-class infrastructure. Prices will remain muted. It will become an FMCG or a consumption product, and prices will remain, and then all this nexus will go away. That's the only way to do it. Increase production. When Maruti was launched, sorry, I'm intervening. When Maruti was launched, there was a premium of 50,000 or a lakh of rupees on a product which was 1 lakh rupees. And so when the supply increased, what happened? You have to serve the customer, and customer is king. We have still not accepted that the customer is king. Look at the advantages of our residential sector. Foreign investors are not allowed, unlike in Dubai and London and New York, various other markets where foreign investors are driving the real estate demand of that particular city or country. You have no tax benefit for second home. The first home benefit is also muted for an affordable housing, right? You have GST and stamp duty, both. So it is a negative NAV on day one. Your rental yields are 2. Your cost of fund is 6.7. Your mortgage to GDP is the lowest in the world. And you are only user-driven market. So we have long, when the wealth will be created, will grow at 7%. Demand is going to be very consistent. We need to change ourselves as an industry.
Amit, you've almost brought out everything that's negative about the market, but I'm going to move to something more positive. And our topic today was discussion on budget. I think one of the critical points there was one nation, one registration software. Abhishek, what's your view? Saying, is this going to disrupt anywhere registration of deeds and documents? I mean, today also we all have to stand in queues in really bad environments and trying to register our docs, and so inconvenient. So how is this going to disrupt real estate sector?
So Shobhit, very important question, and I think it will bring about a big positive change in the way people actually do business. I mean, or home buyers or large corporate houses or a developer. I think it is time that we go completely electronic, where in fact Maharashtra actually came up with a circular in April 2020, where a developer actually could do bulk registration in their offices. So we have seen a precedent, and it can happen. The only challenge what I see is there may be certain politics around that. Some states may feel threatened that there is a bulk of revenue. Again, registration charges are high in certain states. In Maharashtra, of course, they're nominal, they're 30,000, but you have some states where the registration charges are as high as 4%. And it's a big revenue for the state. So there are a lot of concerns. Few of the states have expressed that this will take away their revenues. And again, the experience with the GST, some accusing some states, alleging that they've not been getting their GST compensation. So I think those discussions are important. Intent is good. It's required for people like us and for large corporate houses, because you know how much time it takes for registration and for evaluating stamp duty. The entire process will get really narrowed down. So it's required for the industry, but there will be a lot of dynamics which the central government will have to take care of while actually implementing this policy.
So you're saying overall very positive, very good initiative, but difficult to execute. And
Yes.
like many other policies, if executed well, it'll bring about a positive change.
Absolutely.
Speaking on tax and government announcements, I'm going to come to you, Neeraj. There was there was an anticipation that the long-term capital gain on REIT units, which are to be held for 3 years, will be now brought down to 1 year. It was as if we were all looking at the government saying it's going to come in this budget. But naturally, it's not happened. Do you think it's a good idea, and will the government listen to this?
Sure. So in terms of the reduction in like the holding period for REIT units, from 3 to 1 would have certainly helped, from the point of view of the cost of transaction with respect to the capital gains tax, and also increase the capital churn as well, for the retail investors, and brought it at par, with the other listed shares also, as we have, for the listed companies. But this certainly has not happened. This would have was something which was being looked at, and if would have happened, it would have helped us in kind of increasing the retail participation also, because REITs as an instrument, I mean, it's an attractive investment area. During the pandemic also, we've seen that it has been resilient, and in terms of the fact that it's one of the avenues for stable cash flow, and optimizes the risk as well. And the fact that we've got 3 successful REITs that have happened in the country, and the participation in them has been increasing in that. So from a outlook perspective, although it remains very strong, and but for certainly it has not happened this year, and as was the case for a few other areas as well. But I think from an overall perspective, like what we were discussing earlier also, that demand side is not what the government has addressed in this budget, given that the sector was having like a certain amount of momentum right now, and in terms of the thrust has been more on the capex side, there. So one would expect and hope, that the industry and we, as participant, we kind of represent this even more strongly, and hope that, because the government does make changes during the year also. I mean, the current government has made this a practice that they don't wait for the budget only to kind of make the changes possible. So I would not say that we have to wait for the entire year, but we're hopeful that, that the efforts on, representation increase, and this may be possible in near future. That's what you can expect.
Good. Thanks, Neeraj. I'm just going to do, we've spoken a lot on Resi, and before we go back, one question on SEZs. There was an announcement in the union budget saying we will rewrite the laws of SEZs to promote exports. I mean, the government did want these SEZs to flourish and continue to flourish. They were flourishing. They wanted to continue. And one of the things that we were anticipating is they'll say rupee transactions are going to be allowed rather than just doing dollar denominated transactions. Is that correct? Is that change going to come in? Because they haven't really given out what are the changes they're going to do. So what are the top 1 or 2 changes that you expect in the SEZ law? And maybe Abhishek, you can answer it after Neeraj.
No, so from SEZ perspective, we've not seen the takeoff on SEZs, in the manner in which was envisaged. I think the scheme did came up in a very big fanfare around it, but we've seen rollback, on several SEZs around it, de-notification of the SEZs as well. So, right now at least the changes are not clear in terms of what change would happen, but I think the industry has represented enough that this scheme needs to have a relook on it, and there is some percentage of the work which can happen in the domestic side of it also would be a welcome step in that. But currently, of course, the changes are not clear. So one would hope that they do happen quicker, and also which are beneficial for the overall industry there.
Thank you, Abhishek. You want to add something?
Yeah. So Shobhit, of course, nobody can guess what the law would look like. As a lawyer, it will be an interesting thing. The new law gives a lot of business to lawyers. So we are looking, of course, for a new law. Of course, business-wise, it is important. And I've seen a lot of SEZ have still not been able to utilize their lands. they're also not going for denotifications of the land. So I think the government is aware that there's a lot of land which is locked in SEZ because of various disincentives on the tax part, which is not available to developers. And I think there was a sunset clause which has taken away the benefits for various units which were there. And the government understands that these incentives which were available, which have now ceased to exist, they need to come back. So I think I'm looking forward for a positive legislation which will address various issues of the industry, especially in the tax part.
So you're sort of saying that the scheme was good, government is conscious, and therefore they will bring about hopefully positive changes, because that's the demand from the industry. Absolutely. And also from the sector. So good. Sounds like the budget is heading in the right direction. Hopefully, maybe like Neeraj said, some things may be announced outside the budget. So let's go there. Let's jump back to Resi, and this is a question to Amit and maybe Ashwinder and Ambar. You can join in. There was also a very large discussion around government's agenda saying housing for all, but perhaps what they've now started to think about and realize that housing for all does not mean that everybody needs to buy a house, and therefore there was a whole conversation about build to lease, just the way you do for offices, saying you build to rent, right? And there was laws that were going to come about trying to make it sort of safer for the landowners to lease this, operate it, and legislate, especially for the bottom tier of the market, right? So Amit, what's your view on this? That just like the global trend, are we going to start bringing in single unit homes, multi-unit families and all of that? It's established concept globally, but in India we don't do it. So what's your view?
I think we need that both in industrial housing and also in mid-segment. The biggest impediment is the gap between the interest cost and the yield today. So how will it make, in commercial properties, the cost of fund and the rental yield, there is a positive arbitrage. In residential, the cost of fund is 6.7 and the rental yield is 2%. The solution to that is only bringing in a world-class sustainable infrastructure where supply increases, so the prices remain muted. Because,
you're saying supply holds the key to unlocking this, and at a large scale, it's not. But who's going to do it? Because if it's not that profitable, like you mentioned, why should developers jump into it? So is it the government that has to build it? Who has to build it?
So either the adequate tax incentives have to come in, or under the public-private partnership, certain land which are owned by government has to be unlocked, where private players have to be invited. But then, you are actually giving an arbitrage, and no arbitrage is sustainable for life. So I guess the only way is to bring in more supply and give tax incentives for someone who's doing it. Then it becomes, otherwise economically, it's not viable to do it. See, if I build a rental housing 30 or 40 kilometers away from the city, which is not walk to work, it is not serving any purpose. So one, it has to be walk to work, so established suburbs or industrial townships, where the land has to be either made available under public-private partnership backed with tax incentives. Otherwise, the overall supply has to go up, and probably 20 years down the line, you will have a situation where everyone will start doing rental housing because the cost of fund and the rental housing, there'll be a positive arbitrage. Otherwise, I don't see it happening.
Ashwinder, you are on both sides. You've seen the developer side, the services side, also on the mortgage. What's your view? What's the right balance for rental housing?
Shobhit, I am not in favor of prices remaining muted. Real estate is an asset class. Real estate has always been an investment asset class. When you profile a customer, you look at how much gold he has, how much debt he has, how much equity he has, how much real estate he has, how much crypto he has these days, and maybe derivatives, etc. I don't think it is good for an industry that the prices remain muted just because we want to attain some larger, objectives. You look at San Francisco, you look at Canada, prices are doubling in 2 to 3 years of real estate. And that is where most of the investment is coming in. So I have a very strong view on that prices should not be, because finally, it has to be a capitalistic driven environment. On this particular thing, I feel we need low cost of funds to simplify the conversation. We need anybody who has a cost of fund of 2% to come in India, create strong, ease of doing business by the government, unlock the land by the government. There is a public-private partnership that happens. Automatically, your residential yields will go up from in Bangalore, for example, Shobhit, the residential yield is 3 to 4%. It is nowhere near 2%. Across all good properties, the rental yield is anything between 3 to 4%. Mumbai, it is not 2%, it is definitely 3% or a little around that. So the moment we get rental housing funded by institutions, which might be an RDA or a Mubadala or a Singapore government, and we will have to figure out a way to attract capital and create an ease of doing business for this new asset class within real estate, your yields will definitely go up to 4 to 5%. That is what happens in Dubai. How did Dubai have a 4 to 5 to even 6% of residential yield? It did not happen overnight. In 1980s, 1985, 90, the yield was 2.5, 3%. So it is a supply demand thing. It is quality that you have to give. You will have to give cheaper capital. Matlab, it is a very simple conversation. You need to get cheaper capital from somebody where capital is not a constraint, which are all these sovereign funds where government will have to partner with somebody private in India, get them to get into this area, unlock the land, and figure out a way where people make money. Because if you don't want people to make money, then we are a socialistic economy and we want prices to remain muted. Then I don't know, we want higher salaries, but we want the prices to remain muted so that everything else remains great. So I have a very different view on this.
Because absolutely.
Yeah.
So you're right. I'm in your camp saying let the prices be determined by the market.
Yes.
And businessmen are here to make profit. And you do businesses because you want to make profit. Yeah, reasonable profits. Let me not put it disproportionately. But Ambar, just bringing you in, saying we saw the Swami Fund being set up 1 year ago. It has started to impact the market. It's unclogging the stuck projects. Government was very sensible in terms of pricing it. So they've done 12% pricing. Can you, or do you think, are you in agreement with Ashwinder and Amit? And do you think there is a mechanism by which a social impact fund can be set up around rental housing, so that maybe some piece of interest or income tax or any other government benefit can come to the sector to kickstart this? It may not be sustainable, but at least to kickstart it until it grows on its own 2 feet, and then maybe somebody will take it up. But I think the issue is the initial sort of start that is required in this sector. What's your view?
Yeah, so I'm afraid I do not agree with Ashwinder. I agree with Amit, that. So while I agree with Ashwinder that the market should decide the pricing and so forth, and the market has been deciding the pricing, right? Price, I'll just spend 30 seconds on price. Price is a function of demand and supply. If you look at the last 10 years demand for residential real estate, top 6 cities, right? From 5 lakh units in 2010-11 to 2.5 lakh units pre-pandemic, or less than 2.5 lakh units in 2019. So there was no demand, and which is the reason why the pricing has remained where it has remained. Personal view, pricing in India for residential real estate is already very, very high. I don't think it should be higher than where it is. I mean, if you look at the median, and mind you, when we talk about India, it's very difficult to talk about averages, but for the lack of better yardstick for measuring it. I mean, if your per capita income is $2,000, which by the way did go down pre-pandemic as well, right? And during the pandemic also, the kind of housing values that we're talking about, and when the government talks about affordable housing and definition of affordable housing, 25 lakhs, 30 lakhs, and so forth. So in these top 6 cities, we find it very, very weird and very, very distinct. But end of the day, per capita income of India is $2,000. Okay, because of the negative arbitrage between rental and mortgage rates, and one of the key reasons for that negative arbitrage is the denominator effect, is the house prices. If the pricing in Mumbai, housing pricing in Mumbai goes down by 50%, Ashwinder, your rental yield will become 6%. And suddenly now you're talking about a parity between rental yields and mortgage rates. From a rental housing standpoint, I don't see it happening in a public-private partnership or a private initiative entirely. This is a lot of governments in a lot of countries have done government housing. Singapore does it, Mexico does it, Brazil does it. This is a subsidized housing for urban poor, for migrant laborers and so on and so forth. The government will have to unlock their own land, build on their own. I mean, obviously, private contractors and construction contractors could come in. And as you have various schemes like a Manrega or all of those, in a similar fashion, you will have a scheme which will allow migrant workers to live for rent in these social projects, social housing, government housing projects. That is the only way to do this. I don't see this changing in the next decade to 15 years. This equation that we find ourselves in at this point in time. Pricing is determined by the market, and it is too high, in my opinion.
So you are saying somebody has to bring about the balance. Currently, it is one-sided, and therefore there is a constraint.
Shobhit, I just have one question for you, because you work in the capital markets quite aggressively, and it is from a residential.
I thought you're not allowed to ask questions to moderator. That's my job.
Just from a residential perspective, because you asked that question. What is your view of institutional money and global institutional money like the BlackRocks and Brookfields and the Sandas? Similar money coming into the residential sector, or such institutions setting up shop in India?
So my sense is that the coming decade is for residential in India. It's already critical, and I'll give you two reasons for it. Right, one, we've come out of the pandemic quite strong for a variety of reasons: the self-resilience, government help, etc., etc. You can give the credit to whoever you like, but we've come out quite strong, right? And one thing we've all realized is that housing for all of us is very critical, and pandemic has taught us that lesson. Again, I'm saying needless to get into debate saying how and what, but it is clear. I'm saying in population terms, India and China are equal, right? We are in fact going to overtake China by 2030, right? We are struggling in pandemic to sell 1,40,000 units. We are now saying 2 lakhs this year. We are projecting 3,40,000 by 2 years further, that is 2024. In 2016, when we were at peak, we were at 3,50,000 units. These are primary units being produced first time and sold. And for the life of me, I have now 22 years in this, almost all of us are in real estate. We've been measuring 6 cities. Sometimes we try and add Ahmedabad in it, so we become 7 cities. China, on the other hand, guess what they do, right? Housing demand will remain if number of people are the same, right? Forget everything else around it. They sell 1 crore unit a year, and they measure 64 cities. We are stuck with 6 cities. We are not able to talk about 7 cities. When we start talking about Calcutta, it becomes irrelevant. You talk about Ahmedabad, it is too small, right? So at some point, in my view, this change has to come. This change will come when top cities get exhausted and we stop it. I think, one of the things that has happened during the pandemic is people have gone back to hometowns. They've left the rental houses in Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad. Hopefully they'll drive this change. But I'm just hoping that at some point we become 1/10 of China in number of units sold. It cannot continue to be saying there is no correlation at all if the demographics is the same. And by the way, we are younger, right? So we need houses for longer period of time, right? So you can't, in my view, it's just mathematically not adding up, saying why should India be such a laggard? And how can you solve housing for all if you keep talking about 6 cities and 3 lakh units for sale, right? It's not possible.
Maybe the only point can be Ambar's point of per capita income.
Yes, I was just going to say that.
Maybe we need to do something at some point. Maybe manufacturing will come in. Maybe infrastructure will drive this growth.
Because Shobhit, yeah, because money is only going into few hands. It is very concentrated. I think, that is the whole problem.
Amit, you've lent to enough projects, or funded enough projects, if I may be using the wrong word, but what's your view? When do you see a tier 2 explosion? When do we add 7th, 8th, 9th city? By the way, we opened a small office experimentally in Lucknow about 2 years ago, and it surprised us. So we've added one more to our own sort of counting, but we are quite surprised by a positive response on the city of Lucknow. From a Resi perspective, I just want to hear the panel saying, can union budgets do something? Do we need to do something? How do we kickstart Resi in a big way, which I think it is in all, at least my personal hope, and I think everybody around the country is saying that Resi is going to go out of the sky this time.
Shobhit, I think you have actually touched the right chord, and I was going to say Tathastu. I agree with you fully that what you are saying is Resi is going to drive the next round of growth for a simple reason. If you go to US also, and the data is not going to be different. So only one slight difference of opinion currently I have, because we do not have the potential to build cities like Mumbai, Pune once again in the next 20 or 30 years. When a road like Dwarka Expressway has taken 15 years, and a road like Noida and Greater Noida has taken 20 years to be fully inhabited. People do not stay on the entire 22 kilometers. They only stay in the first 12 kilometers. So if you go to US and you see the home builders data, the top 15 home developers who are in multi-storied apartments, they are responsible for 75% of the supply. That trend is there. So I don't see this 7 city will become a 20 city. Why? And I'll give you a reason. One, because the scale, size, volume, margin, pricing, everything is in the top 7 cities. And hence they will focus here only here. And courtesy the state government initiatives, now the FAR has been increased multifold and premiums have been reduced. So supply will continue to come here for the next 10, 20 years. And the horizontal developments will take place in tier 2, tier 3. So you are also absolutely right. When during pandemic, people went back to their hometowns, they realized that they needed 2 extra bedrooms, one for themselves, one for their parents, because everyone was working from home. So the demand in tier 2, tier 3 also came back with a vengeance. And I have seen a kind of a listed and unlisted developer, who I'm naming, went and launched a project in Bareilly, and I could see, and it was nostalgic reminded me of 2006 and 7. There was a queue outside waiting to be allotted development. But whether multi-storied can be consumed there in volumes is a function of how well you drive the commercial sector, which is the manufacturing sector. And blue collar will not have that affordability. Coming to your point of Lucknow, I think you went to the most populated city of this country after the top 6 cities. But give me one more example where you will go and you will have the same response. So I think here I'll end my views and I'll leave the other.
I probably have the answer to that because we are charting our growth plan, and we think the next growth for us is Jaipur. So we are looking at moving our next office to Jaipur. So we've covered the top cities, but now we are saying, okay, let's go after capital cities. I'm not sure whether Bhopal will come next, but we are ourselves thinking about saying we need to do something more than these top 6 cities. We added Ahmedabad, then we added Lucknow. We've added Chandigarh, by the way, we just added it. And now we're going to think about Jaipur. I think very good discussions. I just want to add one thing, because this is all about hits and misses. And I just want probably just one wish list from starting with Neeraj saying, if not in 2022-23 union budget, what would you like to add or see in the next budget or before that? Just one mega point that sort of disrupts the industry from your wish list, and maybe Neeraj and then Abhishek I'll call out the names.
So I think, while it's been a very long pending demand, in terms of the reduction that we get currently, like, capped at 2 lakhs, for the home buyer, and, the incentive for the second home, I think if these two are done, I think it gives a very strong message, from the buyer community perspective. So one is for the first term housing as well as from a second housing perspective as well. So both the investor as well as the people who are in need for the housing, both would kind of get benefit with that, because the current limits are too inadequate, for making any meaningful impact, for even first time home buyers on that. And then second home time buyers are very, very critical, for sustaining demand, and also, for the question that you were trying to allude to earlier, that, I think the housing supply for rental also would come in more, if we are able to get an additional demand, done through the second home incentives around it. So these two would be my asks there.
Thank you, Neeraj. Abhishek?
I think infrastructure status will help to address all the issues regarding cheap and long-term fund for the industry. Of course, it has been already done for data center, affordable, and logistic, but I think resi as well as commercial, it will help the industry along with the GST discussion what we had. I have some trust in the industry and allow ITC, I would say.
And I'm just going to diverge. What's keeping it away from that infrastructure status is probably, I mean, if I had to want list, I'll say, chalo, tumko chahiye, le lo, infrastructure status. What's keeping the government away from it? What's their fear?
I think, honestly, I don't have an answer for it, but I think gradually the government has been increasing and adding different asset classes to infrastructure status. As you see, it came from affordable, then warehousing, and then you have logistics. I'm expecting at least commercial should get added soon, the way commercial is expanding, and the last one will be resi. But resi is very important. The point which Ambar was making, none of the PEs will invest. It has to be pension money or a long-term ECB, which gets you cheap fund for a long time. I think the next could be office. I hope so.
Thank you, Abhishek. Ambar, next, your wish list on one point.
If there was one point only, my ask is make the HRA tax benefit equal to my mortgage tax benefit. Today, I get a disproportionately high tax benefit on HRA, at least the top 6 cities, right? If I'm renting the same house, my tax benefit is very, very high. But if I buy that same house and I'm taking a loan and paying the EMI for it, my tax benefit goes down to like 5% of that.
Yeah, so you're saying there should be equitable sort of status between buying and renting.
I'm the same guy. My house is the same house
and the same
but you
income.
Treat it differently depends on who owns it. So that's not acceptable.
I think fair point. This is a new one that I've heard, but yeah, it's quite interesting.
No, I've been saying this the last 10 years. This is the single, when you do an analysis, Shobhit, of buy versus rent, one of the key things is taxation, right? I'm willing to pay that 4% negative arbitrage for that emotional, this thing of owning a house. But taxation is something which is ridiculous. Renting a house is much, much more beneficial taxation-wise versus paying the EMI for it.
No, I agree with you. There's no doubt about it. Ashwinder, one big wish list.
Shobhit, I think the biggest worry right now in the developer side is the increased input prices that is happening. Construction built environment contributes to 10% of the GDP. I feel there needs to be some benefit on the taxation side given to investors who are investing in ready to under construction property. Under construction property needs to be treated as an investment so that the cycle of construction doesn't get impacted. And if the prices have to increase by 5 to 7%, which I feel will have to get, they might go up. And that is where the capital appreciation will also kind of get nullified. I feel there needs to be some benefit. Forget about tax. We keep on saying tax benefit, maybe they're not hearing, but they have to do something where people start getting motivated to invest in the under construction property because you have delayed cash flows, and then you get some cash benefit. So that price increase also gets addressed and the demand does not get muted.
Understood. So you're saying give some tax benefits, fiscal benefits for the money going into construction.
Yes.
Because it's against increased costs.
Yes.
Costs are ever increasing. Can you do something there to promote or increase supply?
Yeah.
Lastly, I should say not though last but not the least, Amit, what's your one wish list?
I'll take it in two phases. One, first time home buyer, increase the tax benefit, as Neeraj has said it, because, and when housing for all is achieved, then give the second home tax benefit.
And when,
when housing for all is achieved, then give the tax benefit for the second home, and that will pave the way for rental housing going forward. And I think that explains why Ambar and we continue to stay on rent.
Super. I think thank you very much. I'll just try and summarize, our wish list so that everybody, even the new panelists, have heard it. So we are saying, so far so good. But if things can be done for home buyers, such as deduction for the first purchase of home buyers, which is limited to 2 lakhs, if we can increase, give some additional benefits for second home so that they can invest and increase rental infrastructure, give infrastructure and status to real estate, including residential. I know certain sectors have been given, and IST to GST, that means input tax benefit. I think Ambar's point was very well taken, saying please equate rent versus buy from a taxation perspective. And Amit, to your point, saying let housing for all be achieved, and then we'll have a longer list of ask, but at least meet the benefit for the home buyer, which is the first one. I think that's really important. Thank you everybody again for taking out this hour on Saturday, and Realty Conclave for having us. I'd like to thank my panelists once again, and over to you.
We have one query from our viewer is, what is the scoring the budget gets? We have had almost a month to see, the impact and the observations on the market. So according to real estate, what is the scoring out of 10 from our speakers? Shobhit, let's start from you.
I would rate it somewhere in the, and I'm sort of talking impulsively, perhaps 7 on 10, not 10 on 10, saying it did not create any negative impact. It could have had a little bit more positive. So I would give it 7 on 10.
Okay, no bad news is good news. Ambar, your scoring for the budget?
7 on 10.
Okay, great. Ashwinder, what do you have to say?
I think they missed the goal only. I'm unable to score them, to be honest.
Okay.
Because there was hardly anything about real estate, Sapna, in this budget. So kind of they just avoided they just went away without discussing much about real estate. Because if you look at all the real estate gurus and what all they were expecting from real estate, nothing was addressed.
So there's no negative marking, right?
Yeah, there's no negative marking. There's no negative marking at all.
Okay, fantastic. Abhishek, what do you have to say? Ashwinder has said that at least there's no negative marking. So,
no, I think honestly, it has not addressed many of the expectations. But yes, I can see the intent is good, especially with many. Like a data center, it was expecting. So I would say it's 50-50. I mean, honestly, I'm happy nothing negative has gone, but there are too many other things which are not addressed. And I hope in the next budget, it will be addressed as is being done gradually.
Okay, so maybe 5 out of 10. So
yes.
Okay, Amit, over to you now. What do you have to say?
So I think it is 7 out of 10 overall, keeping in mind that data storage, energy storage, everything has been infra. But from a PE point of view, I will say if you don't give anything, PE stands to benefit. So I will rate it as an 8 out of 10 actually.
Okay. So some good news maybe for the government. And now the one last question that we'll take is what, according to you, will shape up the real estate going forward, 2022? What is going to shape up the real estate? Ashwinder, let's start from you.
I think, Sapna, we have to be very home buyer centric. The home buyer confidence has to be increased. We have to think home buyer, home buyer, home buyer, and we have to build that trust bridge with the home buyer. And some of my, respected panelists have already made that we have to move out of the mindset that India is only in the top 6-8 cities. Lot of focus on home buyer because we are the largest populated country in the world after China. And if we can get them excited about buying a home, because home is not an investment and it is also a requirement, and there is a huge affordable, huge segment that only can afford a home between 25 to 35 lakhs. We need an environment where we get money from outside, institutional money coming in from outside, and build trust for the home buyer so that everybody deserves a home. Everybody deserves a home, and people are motivated to invest in this asset class and stay in their home. Home.
Okay, so trust building is what is going to shape the real estate going forward. Ambar, your views. What is going to shape real estate in 2022?
Two things. Negative real interest rates. They've been negative for now over 2 years. If we can continue to see negative real interest rates for another couple of years, then I think that's something which is going to define the residential sector. And second is infrastructure growth. These are the two things that will shape real estate. The speed with which the infrastructure develops, and implementation of the various things that we've talked about.
Okay. Amit, what according to you will shape the real estate?
Demand is back. It is sustained. I agree with Shobhit. And if we continue to increase supply, and money supply will automatically increase. On the debt side, it has come back. On equity, the day is not far. In any case, it is coming back as equity in terms of QIPs and IPOs of real estate companies. It will come as private equity, increase the supply, and demand is there to stay. If you continue to grow at 6.5%, 7% also, you will create so much of wealth in the country. And in pandemic, all of us have learned we need upgraded homes, we need homes with extra room, and we need second homes.
Fantastic. So supply is what is going to, shape up the growth of real estate going forward. Mr. Abhishek Sharma, what will you add to that?
I think availability of funds as well as, expeditely giving approvals, because it affects the pricing of a project. And of course, I agree with what all other panelists have said, right from Ashwinder to Amit. I think availability of fund is very important, as well as construction timeline approvals are very important. Right. These are two they directly impact the cost of the project.
That's correct. Shobhit, your closing remarks, what is going to shape up the real estate of 2022?
You asked the most important question at the end, but I'd like to add to whatever everybody has said. Of course, I agree with the comment saying, please reduce the friction cost, right? Whatever it is for the home buyer to pay 5% GST plus stamp duty at various rates plus registration cost, I think it's too expensive. To say 10-12% just goes away straight, is added to your cost, and there's of course the cost of interiors which will follow, but that's very high friction for incentivizing the home buyers to buy more, because the more they buy, the more will get built, everything will happen, but please don't have such high friction cost.
Okay. Fantastic. So I think the entire sense we are getting from this entire discussion is from the demand side, we need to do more to incentivize buyers to create a affordable ecosystem for them to start investing in real estate. So fantastic. I think we had some very brilliant takeaways from this discussion. Thanks, Shobhit, for bringing out the best and that interesting conversation that we had with all our speakers. Mr. Bansal had to leave a little early, so thank you, Mr. Neeraj Bansal. And Ambar Maheshwari, always a pleasure to hear your views on our panels. Mr. Ashwinder Singh, thanks for being here with us. Mr. Abhishek Sharma, thank you for sharing your point of view, and Mr. Amit Bhagat for being part of this session. Thank you so much to all our speakers for that wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.